In this segment, we're going to take a look at how we can record audio and MIDI with a focus on virtual instruments. So I've got this blank project open. First thing I need to do is go up under my project menu to add track, and I'm going to create a MIDI track. Now before we dive in and start recording MIDI, let's first talk about the distinction between MIDI and audio. These are two completely different things. Audio is actually going through the process of recording the waveforms. Once that has been recorded, there's not much we can do in order to correct certain things in terms of like your performance or timing. MIDI, on the other hand, is completely flexible in that regard. What you're doing when you're recording MIDI data is recording the performance, how you've played something, what notes you've hit, how quickly you've hit the notes, how hard or soft. Once we've recorded that, we can go back and perfect that performance. We can go through and, with quantize, adjust the notes so they match a specific kind of grid. I can fix any flubbed notes that might have happened. Once we've gone through that process, our next step, after we've recorded the MIDI data, is to make sure that it's audio data. So then we can add certain effects, like audio effects, in terms of reverb, delay, chorus, any kind of time-based effect, dynamics as well. So what's really interesting, though, is the virtual instrument. The virtual instrument is sort of a hybrid between both MIDI and audio. It is played by MIDI, so we would control it and play it just like you would any outboard hardware synthesizer. But what's interesting is the output of that software synthesizer is connected directly to the mixer. So we don't have to go through that process of recording the audio from the MIDI. So that leads us to our next step, since we're going to start off using a virtual instrument. What I first need to do is go up under Devices to VST Instruments. I just want to point out right next to that it says F11. That is the quick key to open up your virtual instrument folder. So when I bring this open, it brings up this folder right here. You'll notice there's up to 64 virtual instruments that we have available to us. It is processor dependent, so if you're on a slower computer, you're probably not going to get all 64 going. But we're going to start with number 1, and the first thing I'm going to do is go down to Drums, and I'm going to pick the LM7. Now the LM7 is a drum machine that's modeled after a Linn drum by Roger Linn, one of the earlier drum machines. If we go ahead and hit each of these pads or buttons, we'll hear each of these drum sounds. But I'm still not actually able to play this with my MIDI keyboard just yet. I need to go through the process of assigning my MIDI output. So if we notice over here in my inspector, I'm going to click on my MIDI track, and I want to make sure that I have the MIDI track record armed, or record enabled. I'm going to turn that on. You'll notice I get the little red dot. That means I'm sending MIDI out. Right now what we're hearing is a hardware synthesizer. What I want to do is control my LM7. So if you focus your attention right here to where it says out, right now it says port 1. I'm going to click and hold on that. I'm going to get a drop-down list. I'll see all the available MIDI ports that are available in terms of my hardware MIDI outputs, but also there's my LM7. So I'm going to select that as my destination for my MIDI routing. So now I'm actually able to record this MIDI data. I'm actually going to switch it to a different instrument or a different preset, so for different sounds. You'll notice I've closed out that drum machine. If you notice right here, that little arrow with the looks like a keyboard on it, says Edit VST Instrument. If I click on that, it'll bring back open this window. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click on the little box at the top, and I'm going to select the 909. Named after the TR-909, which was originated by Roland. It's a classic electronic drum machine. So now that we've got this set up, I also want to point out one thing. You'll notice as I've created a virtual instrument, automatically I have a folder up here. And within that VST instrument folder, there is the LM7 folder. And inside of that, I'm starting to see all the different types of automation I can use on that on that LM7. So we'll come back to that in just a little bit, but I just wanted to point out, as you're starting to add instruments, they will show up in this VST instrument folder. We can collapse this just to make some more room, so we don't necessarily have to look at it all the time. But I think we're getting ready. Next thing I want to do is make sure that we are set up in terms of our tempo. So I'm going to make sure my click track is on. Now it's really important to use your metronome. There's my metronome. If I don't use a metronome, if I just hit record and start playing away, I have no timing reference. That metronome is giving me a 4-bar count, basically on every quarter note. What that allows me to do is to play within that confine. What that allows me to do is to go back and quantize my notes. I can basically fix all of my timing errors